Welcome back to our channel. Today is a beautifully chaotic Tuesday in the world of Genoa, and honestly, my head is spinning with everything that just happened on screen. Let's dive into this absolute madness together. I've been thinking about this, and I also see how horrifying what Cot just revealed to Bill is. We all know Hayley is somewhat shady, right? We've felt that underlying tension for months. But a professional con artist with multiple fake identities. That's a whole different level of antisocial behavior. I'm sitting here trying to process this woman's extreme audacity. Caught walking in and pulling the pin on this emotional bomb. Well, it's a brilliant television show, but it's also incredibly terrifying from a psychological standpoint. You look at Hayley and you see a carefully constructed facade, the perfect partner she pretends to be, and now we know it's all fake. Every smile, every loving kiss, every touch, every comforting word was a meticulously calculated act in a long-term deception. Just thinking about the depth of that deception sends shivers down my spine. Let's talk about Bill's reaction because, honestly, the cognitive dissonance happening in his brain right now must be deafening. He is completely shell-shocked. You can see the exact moment his reality shatters into a million jagged little pieces. All those little traces and red flags that Hayley so meticulously tried to sweep under the rug. The weird, hushed phone calls she took in the other room, the bizarre inconsistencies in her childhood stories, the way she would sharply deflect any deep questions about her past. Suddenly, it all aligns. It's like a magic eye puzzle where he finally sees the horrifying picture hidden in the static noise. He's experiencing this massive paradigm shift. But that doesn't explain why he didn't see it sooner. Or maybe it does, because love or whatever toxic dependency she actively cultivated in him is incredibly blinding. You want to believe the person you sleep next to is who they say they are. What fascinates me the most is that Bill doesn't immediately confront her. He doesn't scream. He doesn't throw a glass against the wall. He doesn't demand answers right then and there. He goes quiet. He starts acting, secretly verifying the information Cop provided. This is a crucial psychological pivot for his character. He's moving from the role of the oblivious, trusting victim to the active, calculating investigator, episode. I can't remember the exact latest episode number, but around that point where he looks at her across the living room, you can practically see the gears turning behind his eyes. He's basically running a covert operation inside his own house. He's checking her phone records, looking into those fake names Cott mentioned, piecing together the timeline of her lies. It's a survival instinct kicking in, which is deeply ironic considering his physical survival is currently compromised by the very woman he's investigating. And that brings us to Hayley. Hayley is a predator, and predators have an innate, almost supernatural sense for when the environment shifts. She feels it. She feels Bill's suspicion radiating off him like heat from a radiator. The dynamic has fundamentally changed, and she knows she's suddenly cornered. The invisible walls are closing in on her carefully constructed grift. She realizes, with this chilling, absolute clarity, that Bill will not believe a single word she says anymore. Her primary weapon, her ability to manipulate him emotionally, to twist his perceptions and gaslight him into submission has been completely neutralized. It's actually kind of fascinating to watch a master manipulator realize their strings have been cut. She's naked, metaphorically speaking, and she knows the gig is up. The panic in her eyes is something we haven't really seen before. So, what does a professional con artist do when the mark wakes up? They run. They always run. Hayley is secretly arranging everything, packing her go bag, preparing her exit strategy to vanish from the town just like she's probably vanished from a dozen other towns before. It's her default setting, her ingrained survival mechanism. Cut your losses, burn the bridge to the ground, and disappear into a brand new identity. I was watching her movements, the subtle way she's hoarding cash or securing her passport, and it's all textbook flight response. She's a ghost preparing to evaporate into thin air before the authorities can even be called. She knows the longer she stays, the higher the risk of spending the rest of her life in a concrete cell. Okay, I know I just said the opposite, but listen to me. Is she really going to leave? I mean, really think about the sheer volume of effort she has put into this specific con. She hasn't just been lying to Bill, she has been systematically, methodically poisoning him for an extended period. That takes a horrifying level of dedication. That takes a dark, twisted commitment that goes way beyond a standard hit-and-run scam. Bill's fortune is astronomical. It's massive, generational wealth. She is inches away from the finish line. She is so incredibly close to getting her hands on that vast empire. Would she really just walk away and leave all that money on the table just because things got a little hot? Strange, really strange. The whole thing is strange. If you really look at her psychological profile, the greed might actually outweigh her survival instinct at this point. The sunken cost fallacy is hitting her hard. She's invested months of her life, risking first-degree murder charges, slowly dosing him, watching him weaken day by day. To abandon the project now, right before the massive payoff, contradicts the very core of her greedy, narcissistic nature. Maybe she's packing her bags as a contingency plan, but her massive ego might convince her she can still salvage this disaster. She might think she can accelerate the poisoning. Just one massive, fatal dose before Bill can expose her to the authorities or change his will. It's a terrifying thought, but it's entirely plausible for someone this deeply entrenched in their own darkness. But wait, will Bill catch onto her erotic behavior before she can act? Because Hayley is definitely unraveling. The cool, collected, untouchable facade is cracking wide open. She's making mistakes. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I noticed the way her hands were visibly shaking when she handed him that last cup of tea. She's paranoid, jumping at shadows, constantly checking over her shoulder, over-explaining her whereabouts. Bill is already hypervigilant now. He's watching her every single move through the lens of a man who knows he's sleeping next to a monster. The tension in that house is absolutely suffocating. You can cut it with a knife. It's a deadly game of cat and mouse, and the roles are constantly reversing. Is Bill the cat, waiting to trap her with the undeniable evidence? Or is Hayley the cat, cornering a physically weakened mouse for the final, lethal kill? And let's talk about the poison itself, because this adds such a grim layer to the whole situation. Bill has been ingesting this toxin for God knows how long. His body is failing, his organs are struggling, but now his mind is painfully, acutely awake. The duality of his suffering is it's Shakespearean, honestly. He has to pretend he doesn't know she's a fraud, while simultaneously feeling the physical effects of her betrayal coursing through his veins every single day. Every time he looks at her, he has to swallow the bile of knowing this woman, whom he trusted implicitly, is actively trying to end his life. The sheer willpower it takes for him to maintain a neutral expression, to smile at her while secretly gathering evidence against her, is staggering. It's a psychological torture chamber. How is Bill going to face this heartbreaking truth when it all completely comes to light? The betrayal is so absolute, so profound, that it threatens to destroy his fundamental ability to trust another human being ever again. This isn't just a partner cheating or lying about money. This is an intimate, calculated assassination attempt masquerading as romantic love. The psychological trauma of that realization is going to leave scars that are far deeper than whatever physical damage the poison has done to his body. He has to mourn the death of the woman he thought he loved, the future he thought they were building, while simultaneously prosecuting the deadly stranger who wore her face. It's a grief so complex, I don't even know how a person begins to process it. I keep going back to Cott's role in all of this. Why did she wait until now to drop this bombshell? What was her specific catalyst? Maybe she found a piece of hard evidence she just couldn't ignore anymore. Or maybe she realized Bill was physically deteriorating at an alarming rate and put two and two together. Cott essentially threw a life raft to a drowning man. but the life raft is covered in barbed wire. The truth saves his life, but it mutilates his soul in the process. Bill's pain is going to be a massive driving force for the next narrative arc. We are looking at a man who will be stripped down to his rawest, most vulnerable state, and then forced to rebuild himself from the ashes of a completely fabricated relationship. And what happens if Hayley decides to stay and fight? What if she realizes that running means giving up the ultimate prize, and she decides to double down on her lethal plan? The confrontation between them is going to be explosive. I can picture it vividly, the locked doors of the mansion, the desperate accusations flying back and forth, the chilling calm of a sociopath who finally drops the mask because there's no point in pretending anymore. Hayley won't beg for forgiveness because she genuinely doesn't feel remorse. She lacks the capacity for it. She probably tried to rationalize it, or worse, blame him. She might say something twisted like, "You made it so easy," or "You were always going to die anyway." The emotional violence of that impending scene is something I am both dreading and incredibly eager to watch unfold. Ultimately, Bill has to face the heavy consequences of what Hayley has done, not just to him, but to his family, his legacy, and his own self-worth. He let this predator into his inner sanctum. He defended her against his detractors. He pushed away people who tried to warn him. The guilt and shame he will inevitably feel for being duped so completely will be a crushing burden. But there's also a chance for a brutal, glorious rebirth here. A hardened Bill, stripped of his naivety, rising up to reclaim his life, his health, and his empire. The tragedy of this storyline is profound, but the potential for a phenomenal revenge arc is basically writing itself right now. I can't wait to see how the writers navigate this incredibly dark, tangled web they've woven, because the stakes have literally never been higher.